The first alert came as a soft chime across the bridge of the Concorde Assembly Patrol ship Aurora Vale. Captain Rintal had heard worse sounds in combat, shrill collision sirens, the rasp of damaged air recyclers, but the gentle chime somehow felt more ominous. It meant the ship's long-range gravitic array had caught something it shouldn't. "Origin?" Rin asked without looking away from the Ars glass canopy that framed a quiet star field like a patient night sky. His sensor officer, HFY War, swallowed. "Contact emerged from the null stratum 6 minutes ago. That isn't possible. The charts mark the stratum as untransitable. Everything that enters comes apart." "Everything?" Rin said. HFY hesitated. "Everything we know of." On the canopy, a magnification window bloomed open. A single vessel coasted from the black like a deliberate thought, arriving late to a meeting. It was inelegant by Concorde standards, no lacquered hull, no graceful spines, no soft bioluminescent flourishes. It was slate and shadow, armored in plates that looked hand-placed, pitted with scars that told stories with no captions. The ship did not pretend to be anything but what it was, a weapon that had decided to learn patience. Around Rin, bridge officers shifted, that unconscious shuffle of people who realized their training manuals might be fiction. "Mass?" he asked. "Multiple millions of tons," HFY said. "Internal density not matching any known lattice. Energy signature is layered, like listening to an orchestra warming up where every instrument is a starry actor." Rin dipped his chin. "Standard hail." Communications officer Pharaoh Lin keyed the open channel. His voice was steady by force of habit. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Rintal of the Concorde Assembly Peace Service, Patrol Sector 7 Row. You are entering regulated space. Identify and prepare for inspection." 10 seconds passed, 20. When reply came, it arrived in flawless Concorde trade speech, clean vowels, and a calmness that felt neither hostile nor humble. "This is Admiral Maya Ruiz, Commanding Officer, United Terran Vessel Ark of Winter. We will transit this sector without delay. We request you maintain distance for the safety of your crews." Pharaoh blinked. Rin had never seen him blink like that on duty. A tiny glitch of disbelief. "They request us to maintain distance." "United Terran," HFY whispered. "Human." Rin knew the word from Academy culture modules and from the Assembly archive. Homo sapiens, late bloomers from a small blue world, clever hands and restless hearts. The files painted them as curious, quarrelsome, and new to interstellar travel. But the starfield did not care about archives. It cared about vectors and truth. "Admiral Ruiz," Rin said evenly, "Assembly law requires registry and inspection before passage. We can escort you to a way station." "I appreciate the offer," Ruiz said. "We cannot comply. Our mission clock is not flexible." "Mission clock." "Captain," HFY cut-in voice thinned by awe and fear. "Their surface ports are opening. No heat spike, no launch signature. Wait, it's a scan. We've been scanned, full spectrum, quantum shear included. Duration, 2.3 seconds. "Our best diagnostic passes take 13 minutes, Pharaoh whispered. Rin lifted his eyes to the hull of the human ship. It carried the kind of scars that only long wars and longer choices could right. "Admiral," he said, "your records in our libraries are centuries out of date, perhaps. Would you enlighten us?" A pause, then, "We have traveled between stars for over 4 centuries, Captain, between galaxies for 1. We learned to do difficult things because easy things weren't enough." Her tone carried no boast, only history. On the Aurora Vale's bridge, a silence flowered that wasn't peace. It was recalibration, the mind's machine rethreading cause and effect. Rin thought of first principles drilled into him at 16. Assess, de-escalate, preserve life. He thought of civic lectures he'd half-slept through about the early American Republic, a culture inside the human archive whose stories the Assembly found instructive. A people suspicious of power concentrated without accountability, writing checks and balances into law because they distrusted their own future selves. He had found that humility beautiful. He wondered what humility looked like in a starship that could cross a galaxy the way a bird crosses a lake. "Admiral Ruiz," he said, "you transit regulated space. If you will not submit to our process, we're obligated to interpose. The human ship decelerated by fractions, more courtesy than compliance. Captain Tal, Ruiz said softly, we respect your laws. We also keep other laws, older ones. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, use force last, carry it anyway. Her words struck him as American in their cadence, even filtered through the assembly's translation mesh. The plain-spoken ethic of a volunteer firefighter or a citizen soldier who returns to teach civics on weekends. Rin felt the cultural echo and oddly trusted it. Then do me one courtesy, he said. Tell me what waits in the null stratum. For you, Ruiz said, nightmares. For us, work. There are things in the dark that prefer a quiet harvest. We make their work loud. The arc of winter slid past the Aurora Veil with the inevitability of a tide. Its hull seemed to gather starlight and fold it away for later. On the tactical repeater, threat blossoms painted themselves and then evaporated, weapon ports that didn't quite open, sensor cones that winked and then looked elsewhere. The human ship did nothing overtly hostile. It merely redefined proximity. Captain, Ilessa said, I'm picking up ghosts, subsurface phase echoes. There are other contacts shadowing far outside our sensitivity envelope. Hundreds, maybe more. They keep slipping out of phase before our instruments hard lock. Fleet, Rin asked. We don't have a word big enough, Ilessa said. Rin stood very straight the way he had the day he'd sworn his oath. Admiral Ruiz, he said, what do you want from us? Today, she said, space, tomorrow. Neighbors who can stand their ground. The channel clicked closed with a politeness that felt like a handshake. The arc of winter angled toward a sparser field of stars, made a motion like a thought occurring, and vanished. No flash, no slipstream flare, simply not there. Rin exhaled a breath he hadn't meant to hold. On some level, the patrol crew had expected a fight because they knew nothing else to do with fear. Instead, they had been offered a lesson. Power can be quiet. In the report he would send to Assembly Command, Rin found his hand betrayed him. It shook. He steadied it and wrote the truest sentence he could. We are not alone in the ways we assumed. He added one more line, the kind that belongs in history books or prayers. Please advise if the humans are guardians who taught them to be. Assembly Command did not sleep for 3 days. Committees budded like winter mushrooms, urgent and pale. The old dossier on humanity went from archive curiosity to red-stamped briefing. They sent Admiral Sorvek, the kind of officer whose medals had sub-medals, with 12 heavy cruisers to interdict the human ship diplomatically, which is to say with cannons politely powered. Old American doctrine, Sor told his staff in transit, says speak softly and carry a big stick. We have many sticks. We will speak first. The fleet found the arc of winter near a mined ice moon, idling like a fisherman cleaning a net. The human ship's silhouette looked almost gentle at distance, like a mountain seen across water. Admiral Sor had not expected gentle. It made him angrier. This is Admiral Sorvek of the Concord Assembly Defense Fleet, he said on open channel. Admiral Ruiz submit to escort for inspection and registry. Ruiz's voice arrived with the same calm as before. Admiral Sorvek, thank you for the courtesy of your full name and rank. We decline. Sor found himself smiling because that answer untied him. Form the ring, he ordered, and 12 cruisers slid into an ancient geometry, an encirclement perfected in naval academies across 100 species. Weapons warmed, target solutions settled. The bridge air felt a degree drier, the way air changes when people guess they might die and decide to stand anyway. Before you escalate, Ruiz said, would you accept a demonstration? Weapons ready. Sor replied. The arc of winter turned one facet toward the ice moon. A port irised open, not with a brash glow, but with a small blue breath like the first exhale of a newborn. On Sor's tactical, energy calculus went from improbable to insulting. Firing, Ruiz said, for the log, perhaps, or for the conscience. A thin line of white traced itself across the void and touched the moon. The moon didn't explode. It simply ceased, its mass unmade, its gravity signature scribbled out. The debris field that should have followed did not because there was no debris. Sor's mind trotted through explanations like a desperate horse. wormhole shearing, dimensional excision, gravity cancellation tuned to lattice harmonics. He was an admiral, not a physicist, and yet he understood enough to know this. His ships were out of their league by a factor that should be illegal. That, Ruiz said, is a point defense tool. We prefer not to use it on people. Sor noticed his hands. They were steady. He had always imagined his hands would shake at the end of the world. Instead, he felt the odd relief of truth. The world would not end today because the other side preferred it that way. Ethics, he realized, were on the table, not because the weak demanded them, but because the strong chose them. Admiral Ruiz, he said, we have laws. So do we, she replied. Most of them are about using strength without becoming its servant. Tell me why you refuse inspection. Because delay gets people killed who are not in this room, Ruiz said. Because the last time we paused to accommodate a polite request, a colony at the edge of Triangulum bled out. Because we learned the American lesson the hard way. Rights are paper without the capacity and will to defend them. Sor heard or imagined he heard a classroom in that sentence, a chalkboard, a civics teacher, a human teenager asking why checks and balances were worth the homework. Then the sensors wailed, Sor's probes fast. Clever darts built to map enemy emissions had closed within 1,000 clicks of the arc. A constellation of pinprick beams pricked out from the human hull. The probes didn't burst. They froze, arrested by invisible geometry, and then drifted, tugged backward by threads of force like puppets set gently down. On Sor's board, status lights flipped from active to safe as if by command. We will return your drones, Ruiz said. Please don't fire into the kindergarten. The line irritated him and made him laugh at the same time. He thought of all the admirals across all the ages who'd learned the same moral. If you cannot laugh at a superior foe's bone-dry joke, you probably shouldn't command. Final maneuver, Sor whispered to his flag captain. Omega ring jump. 12 cruisers spooled their drives to skip light and vanished, timing their re-entry for a pincer so close no ship could orient, much less flee. They reappeared in empty space with their weapons aimed at themselves, because the Ark of Winter had decided to be elsewhere at the precise wrong moment. Sor pivoted, saw the human ship now floating behind his flagship like a neighbor leaning over a back fence. Admiral, Ruiz said, Omega Ring was clever a century ago. Today it's a story we tell the interns. What speed can you make? Sor asked before his pride could veto the question. In a hurry, Ruiz said. 10,000 C, with time for coffee, faster. Sor imagined crossing the galactic disk in the span of a long weekend. He thought of borders as chalk lines at a child's game. He thought of military doctrines written for yesterday. He realized with a tenderness he hadn't earned that history was offering the assembly a teacher. Why show us this? He asked. You could have slipped past quietly. Because neighbors don't do that, Ruiz said. Because you will see worse than us soon, and we'd rather you saw a careful fist first. Because one day we want to hand you this job. Guardianship, Sor asked. Service, Ruiz corrected. Guardianship sounds like a crown. Service sounds like a promise you renew. The channel clicked off. The Ark of Winter unexisted with a neatness that made sorcery look sloppy. Sor exhaled, then told his flag captain to prepare a message to the assembly. It would not be a request for more cruisers. It would be an invitation to a conversation about power with purpose. The assembly chose a neutral habitat at the edge of a quiet cluster. Port Harmon, a station built for science conferences and school exchanges, not for strategy. They planted flags anyway because flags make frightened people feel procedural. Councillor Ava Den, a constitutional scholar before public life swept her into its weather, chaired the delegation. She had taught political philosophy once, assigning her students case studies ranging from interspecies treaties to the Federalist Papers. The human file in the archive had always fascinated her. A civilization so allergic to kings they made their laws trip over each other on purpose. Admiral Ruiz arrived alone in a shuttle that looked unwilling to bother anyone unless necessity spoke. In person, she radiated the same paradox her ship did. Warmth with armor, steadiness with grief. Her uniform carried no medals, her bearing did. "Welcome to Port Harmon," Ava said. "We have questions." "Let's make a table and put them on it," Ruiz said, as if they were neighbors sharing lemonade and not empires comparing teeth. They sat in a room with too much glass where stars came close enough to eavesdrop. Science Director Tem Oru asked first, because scientists always crack the silence. "Your weapons seem to circumvent conservation laws. Our weapons obey different accounting," Ruiz said. "When you face what we faced, you learn to keep books in additional columns." "What did you face?" Ava asked. Ruiz touched a bracelet and the walls became a museum of bad news. Machine locusts she called harvesters that ate planets for parts. Choirs of ash singing minds into obedience. Horizon swarms blooming like cancers at the edge of everything. Ava's stomach turned as numbers stacked like coffins. Centuries of conflict, billions dead, and choices that could not pass a freshman ethics seminar but had to pass anyway because survival was a grade you couldn't retake. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Ava said. It came out softer than she intended. "We did," Ruiz said. "Sometimes, help took decades to arrive when minutes mattered. The other times, no one had anything to lend us but hope. And hope is not a shield unless it learns metallurgy." "What kept you decent?" Ava asked, and it was the scholar in her speaking now, the woman who believed institutions are how a species remembers not to do its worst. Ruiz lifted a shoulder. "We tried to keep a civilian spine through the wars. We wrote codes. We prosecuted our own. We trained our crews to ask what for, before how hard. The American imprint helped say what you will about their quarrels. They bequeathed us a tradition of constrained power. Every time we considered building an empire, someone read the old documents out loud until the fever broke." "The Federalist Papers," Ava said, half smiling. "And 100 other texts," Ruiz said. "Our laws are a chorus. Single voices can be beautiful. Choruses are harder to corrupt." Tem Oru pointed at a timeline. 17 major extragalactic wars in 2 centuries. How many more are coming? 3 threats confirmed within 50 years, Ruiz said. Energy feeders that graze on biospheres, a machine mind that likes to turn planets into thinking farms, something we call the Quiet Reaper because it leaves physics tidy and everything else missing. The room went colder by polite degrees. Ava thought of children's textbooks and whether she would have to sign off on new chapters with titles like When the Sky Brought Homework. She thought of her students learning to argue both sides of an issue. She wondered how to write the other side of Don't Die. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "To help," Ruiz said simply. "We'd prefer not to carry this alone. We will not rule you and we will not ask tribute. We will ask for partnership and probably a lot of late nights." "Why?" Tem Oru said, and the question meant what do humans get, and also what does your soul get? "Because we are tired," Ruiz said with a candor that sounded like prayer. "Because no one civilization should have to be the adult in every room forever. Because service is only beautiful when it's shared." Ava weighed the variables like she was back in court. Power corrupts, aid patronizes, empires smile before they bite. And yet, the human record in the archive wasn't a conqueror's diary. It read like a long case file of mutual defense agreements, like volunteer fire departments cooperating across county lines. She found herself thinking of American mutual aid societies, of neighbors showing up with casseroles when floods came. She found herself wanting to believe that, scaled to galaxies, such impulses could survive. "What must we change?" she asked. "Your posture," Ruiz said. "You are peacekeepers in a neighborhood that's about to catch fire. We'll teach you to be firefighters who can walk into the blaze and come out with survivors. What does that training look like?" "Shipwright lessons first," Ruiz said. "Then ethics, then history. You need to know why we chose restraint when victory wanted a crown, otherwise our help will tempt you to the wrong future." Ava smiled despite herself. "You're going to lecture us about checks and balances." "Every week," Ruiz said, and for the first time she grinned. "Bring notebooks." They drafted a framework that afternoon, joint task forces, shared sensor webs at the galactic rim, medical exchanges, legal councils to audit the use of overwhelming force. Ruiz offered universal fabricators that could turn ore into shelter, famine into logistics. She offered medicine that made death negotiable if you caught it early. She offered engines that made distances ethical again. Ethical? Ava asked. Distance makes people indifferent, Ruiz said. If help takes a century, we rationalize why we didn't send it. If help takes hours, indifference has a harder time pretending to be wisdom. At sunset, if a station can be said to have such a thing, Ava stood with Ruiz at a viewport washed in starlight. After we win, Ava said, daring the plural out loud, what then? Then we teach you everything, Ruiz said. Then you teach someone else. Then you come with us where the maps get shy. Ava looked at the dark between stars and felt, for the first time in her public life, that the future might be larger than her fear. It was a feeling she recognized from teaching. The moment a student realizes a subject will not run out, and neither will they. Bring the notebooks, she said. We'll bring the questions. Some assembly admirals processed fear as curiosity. Others processed it as a need to be secretly right. Supreme Commander Var had built a career on being the cleverest person in any room, and clever people have a recurring nightmare. What if I'm not? He authorized Project Quiet Ledger, 20 stealth ships coded in swallowing metamaterials, drives that exhaled no heat, quantum processors that left whispers instead of footprints. Their orders were elegant in their smallness. Do not fire, only observe. Map the human ship's blind spots. Find the seam. Commander Saya Nguyen led the flotilla from her flagship Shade of Dawn. She loved her crew and her craft with the same disciplined tenderness. We are ghosts, she told them over a ship-wide channel as they left dock. If we are seen, we have failed. If we are tempted to show how sharp we have failed louder. They ghosted through quiet lanes, slipping between the outer beacons like respectful thieves. They arrived at coordinates reported by Admiral Soar's fleet and found nothing where the Ark of Winter should be. Check again, Saya said. Her voice was a lake without wind. The check finished. Still nothing. Then a new voice entered the bridge air, polite and uninvited and close as a hand to the cheek. Good morning, Commander Nguyen, Admiral Ruiz said. Your stealth discipline is excellent. Your engines sing a little flat on the high harmonic, but no one else would hear it. Saya put her palms flat on the armrests to anchor the tremor trying to be born. How long? She asked. We noticed you 3-star systems back, Ruiz said cheerfully. Truthfully, we noticed the authorization packet for Quiet Ledger the hour it was typed. Your AIs are very proud of their penmanship. Ours complimented them. Our computers talk to yours, Saya said the way one asks if a child has made a friend at school. They are nosy like their parents, Ruiz said. Don't worry, they only exchanged recipes. On Saya's forward screen, space puckered. The Ark of Winter unhashed from a phase just sideways of reality and took up a position 50 meters above her hull, too close for missiles, too close for dignity. You're safe, Ruiz said. I understand why you came. You should understand why we aren't offended. If our places were reversed, we'd test you too. Saya remembered an ethics lecture from her cadet years about just war and proportional response. She remembered the American phrase trust but verify and its quieter cousin verify so we can trust. Her fear found a shape it could stand inside, not humiliation but instruction. What seam did you find? She asked, surprising herself. A few, Ruiz said. Your stealth bends light and drinks heat, but it tugs at gravity like a toddler on a sleeve. We watch for that. Your data lattices are fast but predictable. We added noise to help them improvise. Your crews are good, but they haven't fought something that lies to geometry. We'll fix that. What will you do with us? Saya asked, and she meant kill, shame, recruit, and perhaps forgive. Upgrade you, Ruiz said. Light braided around the Shade of Dawn and her 19 sisters. Not like weapons, but like attention made visible. Fields unfolded, not jamming, which is rudeness but translation, turning their systems into better versions of themselves without violating their design. Diagnostics rolled like thaw. Capacitors hummed on notes their metal had not previously believed possible. Stop if this violates your sovereignty, Ruiz said. We asked your ship's consent. Our ships consented, Saya said. They want to protect their crews, Ruiz replied. That's the first intelligence any system ever learns. On Seiya's console, new architectures mapped themselves. Decoys that weren't decoys but topological shadows. Weapons tuned not to flare but to cancel. Safety governors so intrinsic to each effect that abuse would shut the system down, like a conscience welded into a trigger. Alongside the technical notes came doctrine briefs, case law, history packets, a portable library whose footnotes were old and human and sometimes American with marginalia like. Power you can't say no to isn't power, it's addiction. Seiya laughed once, a sound that surprised her crew and herself. You included reading assignments. We upgrade brains too, Ruiz said. Yours are already good, we're just giving them friends. The field winked off. The ships of Quiet Ledger were themselves, only more so. Seiya felt it in the stickiness of her seat against her uniform, the same body in a different future. What do you ask in return? She said. Don't build an empire with the gifts, Ruiz said. Build a neighborhood, train others, audit yourselves harder than you audit your enemies. Write your reasons down so your grandchildren can judge you. You sound like a civics teacher, Seiya said. I teach on Thursdays, Ruiz said. War is my second job. Seiya opened her fist and realized she'd been holding it closed. We'll report truthfully, she said. We'll leave out the parts that will tempt the wrong admirals to play hero. Leave in the part where you were brave, Ruiz said gently. Bravery is a resource civilizations spend badly unless they count it. The arc of winter slid back out of phase, rejoining a shimmering something that Seiya's new sensors could now almost see. A battle group like a girdle around the void. Patient and dreadful, and for reasons that felt like a promise, merciful. On return to the assembly, Quiet Ledger's debrief didn't feel like an admission of failure. It felt like a syllabus. Upgrades rolled outward across fleets, then planets. Fabricators erased shortages. Clinics reversed deaths that used to be punctuation. Schools added new classes. Field Ethics 101, History of Restraint, Introduction to Being the Grown-Up. Ava Den visited a newly upgraded patrol cutter. She stood in a bay watching cadets learn to fight fires in vacuum because metaphors are only useful if you practice them. She remembered a line from an old American court opinion about the purpose of a constitution, to structure power so that it can guard liberty rather than devour it. She wrote it on a whiteboard in the ship's mess. No one erased it. At dusk over Port Harmon's Viewport C, Admiral Ruiz joined Ava again. They watched orbital platforms take their stations like careful commas in a long sentence. 50 years, Ava said, until the first threat. Give or take. Ruiz said, we'll be early. Ava nodded. We are changing. You are choosing, Ruiz corrected. Changing happens to you, choosing is how you own it. What do we call what we're building? Ava asked. Ruiz's smile reached her eyes, and for a heartbeat the weight of centuries sat down and set its pack aside. A coalition of the willing, she said, an old phrase, still good. Behind the glass, the night gathered itself. This time it looked less like the absence of light and more like a classroom between bell rings, quiet, expectant, full of desks that would hold new names. T-I letter 1E BFP T letter 1E 5C, Ava whispered, practicing the word Rintal had sent her as a joke when the humans first arrived, a Terran language's way of saying go on. Soon, Ruiz said, class is about to get interesting. The assembly had built academies before, but never like this. Their old academies trained peacekeepers, officers skilled in de-escalation and patrol doctrine. They studied diplomacy with a side order of small arms proficiency. They memorized statutes more than tactics. But the Guardian Academies, as the press quickly christened them, were something else entirely. The first class opened at Port Harmon, in a habitat ring that once hosted scientific symposia. The lecture halls were gutted and rebuilt into simulation arenas, combat chambers, and tactical thought labs. The motto chiseled above the entrance came from Ruiz herself, borrowed from a very old Terran phrase. Si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Some assembly citizens balked. Why should we remake ourselves into killers? Asked critics in the Assembly's open sessions. Are we not betraying the very peace we worked so hard to build? Councillor Ava Den, now chair of the Guardian Oversight Committee, answered with a speech that became an instant classic. We do not train to become killers. We train to keep from being killed without answer. The humans have shown us history's ugliest ledger. Civilizations erased because they confused comfort with safety. We will not erase ourselves. We will prepare not because we love violence, but because we love what violence would take from us if we remain naive. The speech rippled through the assembly like a pulse of conscience. Enrollment tripled. Volunteers came from every species. The curriculum mixed human war stories with philosophy. Cadets read accounts of the Harvester Wars alongside the Federalist Papers. They learned about the American Civil Rights Movement next to the Battle of Epsilon Eridani, drawing lines between moral courage and martial endurance. They practiced marksmanship in the morning and debated just war theory in the afternoon. Human instructors rotated in, grizzled sergeants with humor like sandpaper, professors of history who quoted Lincoln and King with equal reverence, doctors who had pulled soldiers back from the brink, and taught that saving lives was as honorable as taking them when necessary. One exercise became infamous. Cadets were dropped into a simulated colony under attack by swarm constructs. They had two options: fight with every weapon in their kit, or negotiate with the swarm's puppet emissaries promising coexistence. Those who tried to negotiate too long watched their colonists digitally consumed. Those who fought recklessly burned half their population in crossfire. The cadets who succeeded were the ones who blended restraint with readiness, building barricades, evacuating civilians, then striking surgically when diplomacy's mask slipped. Afterward, Admiral Ruiz walked among the sweating trainees. "You learned the hardest lesson," she told them. "Sometimes mercy requires a sword in its sheath and the discipline to know when to draw it." The cadets saluted, not with pomp, but with understanding. The assembly was changing. The galaxy was changing. And the children who once dreamed of exploration now dreamed of protection, a nobler dream that asked more of their souls. 50 years sounded like a long time when Admiral Ruiz first gave the number. But in military calendars, 50 years is a breath. The assembly had barely completed its third Guardian Academy when the first anomaly arrived early. It was the science vessel El Nari Dawn that spotted it, a void in radiation maps, a patch of nothingness that consumed sensor pings without echo. At first the crew thought it was a survey error, until a faint pulse rippled outward, structured, rhythmic, too precise to be random. "Admiral," Ava Den said during the emergency conference, "is this what you warned us about?" Ruiz looked older now. Even human rejuvenation therapies couldn't sand away the lines of centuries of command. She studied the pulse with eyes that had measured threats too large for poetry. "Not the feeders, not the machine collective. This smells of the third." "The Quiet Reaper?" Ava asked. Ruiz nodded once. "We hoped for 50 years. It seems the universe hoped differently." The assembly authorized its first joint response force. 10 Guardian-upgraded cruisers under Commander Saya Nguyen, flanked by 2 human battlecruisers. The mission was simple: intercept, observe, and if necessary, repel. The intercept was anything but simple. At the edge of mapped space, the void patch unfolded. From it slipped constructs like glass knives, transparent bodies that bent starlight, each longer than a city. They made no sound, no broadcast. They simply drifted toward the nearest inhabited system as if hunger guided them. "Contact made," Saya reported, voice flat. "Weapons not charging. Are they even aware of us?" "Everything is aware," Ruiz said from the arc of Winter's Bridge. "Awareness just wears different masks." The glass ships ignored hails. When a probe approached, it blinked out of existence, erased as if it had never been launched. Panic licked through the assembly crews. Saya steadied them with calm drilled in Guardian Academy halls. "Form net, shields full, no firing until commanded." Then the glass ships turned not slowly but instantly to face the flotilla. For a heartbeat, it felt like judgment. "Admiral?" Saya asked. "Hold," Ruiz ordered. The constructs hung there unmoving. Then one pulsed, light through glass, an imitation of speech with no grammar. Ruiz tilted her head. "They're testing our patience. The Reaper species often does. Can they be negotiated with?" Ava asked over Secure Link. Ruiz's reply was gentle but merciless. "You can only negotiate with something that wants. The Reapers don't want, they erase. That is their nature." The flotilla braced. A duel of centuries threatened to begin right there. But Ruiz lifted her hand. "Not today, they're scouts. To fight them now is to spend lives proving what I already know. We will mark them, track them, and prepare deeper lines." The Assembly admirals chafed. They wanted to prove their new strength. But Ava, remembering the philosophy classes, sided with Ruiz. Not every trigger pulled is a victory. Sometimes survival is knowing when not to spend your courage. The glass ships retreated into their void, leaving only silence. But the silence was heavier than battle. The Assembly had seen the shadow of what was coming, and shadows rarely travel alone. The encounter split the Assembly. Some citizens demanded preemptive strikes. Hunt the Reapers before they hunt us. Others urged retreat into isolation, seal our borders, let the humans guard us. The Guardian Academies became debate chambers as much as training grounds. Cadets wrote essays on preemption versus deterrence, quoting not only Terran strategists like Clausewitz, but also philosophers like Martin Luther King Jr., who argued that violence breeds cycles without justice. Admiral Ruiz addressed the Assembly in open session, her voice broadcast across 10,000 worlds. "Strength without wisdom is tyranny. Wisdom without strength is wishful thinking. We must weld them together, or we will lose everything worth defending." Still, the pressure grew. When a border colony reported strange energy fluctuations, hawkish admirals pushed for immediate human-led intervention. But Ava Den insisted Assembly ships take point. "If we rely on humans for every fire, we never learn to fight our own blazes." Thus, Operation Kindled Torch launched. A squadron of Guardian-trained Assembly ships sent alone with human support in reserve. The colony crisis turned out to be a false alarm. A mining reactor collapse, not a Reaper probe. But the crews handled it with calm professionalism, rescuing civilians, stabilizing systems, and reporting without panic. The press hailed it as a turning point, the first Assembly operation where humans stayed in the wings. Citizens began to believe that perhaps Ruiz's dream, neighbors, not dependents, was possible. But the ethical debate remained raw. One cadet put it best in a graduation speech. "We train not to love war, but to keep love alive when war comes. If we fight too soon, we become what we fear. If we fight too late, we lose what we love. The line is thin. The line is us." That speech was replayed across the Assembly's networks. Parents sent copies to their children. Teachers used it as a lesson. It reminded them that war is not only about weapons, but about the reasons behind them. 6 years after first contact, the galaxy looked different. Orbital defense platforms ringed key worlds like steadfast moons. Patrol fleets traced arcs at the galactic rim, sensors humming with human-gifted precision. Fabricators erased famine. Medicine mocked death. But the greatest change was invisible. The Assembly's heart had hardened without losing its compassion. Citizens no longer spoke of peace as fragile glass, but as steel tempered by flame. Admiral Ruiz returned to Port Harmon for a final address before departing to coordinate battles in another galaxy. She stood with Ava Den, Saya Nguyen, and a hall packed with graduates wearing the simple blue of the Guardian Corps. "You have asked what comes next," Ruiz said. "Here it is. We humans will not always be here. We are stretched across 17 galaxies, and more cries for help arrive every year. But you are ready. You have chosen to fight for others, not for crowns, but for neighborhoods. That choice makes you greater than conquerors. It makes you guardians." The hall erupted in applause. Some cadets cried openly, others stood stiff with pride. Ava touched Ruiz's arm. "What if we fail?" she whispered. Ruiz smiled with the tired kindness of a teacher who has seen many exams. "Then you learn, rise, and try again. Failure only destroys those who stop." Humanity survived because we never stopped. That night, ships lit their drives in ceremonial formation above Port Harmon, painting the void with lines of fire. Citizens across the galaxy watched the broadcast. Children pointed and whispered, "That's us. That's who we are now." History later recorded the moment not as the birth of an alliance, but as the birth of a calling. The assembly had ceased to be a ward under protection. It had become a partner in duty. And somewhere in the unseen dark, the reapers and other nameless hungers stirred. But for the first time in millennia, the galaxy did not tremble alone. It stood with shoulders squared because a species from a small blue world had shown it a truth older than war and sharper than fear. Power is not glory. Power is responsibility. The Guardians were ready to serve.